Hola.
Hola, hello.
Oh, let me do. Hola, ¿cómo
¿Cómo
estás?
estás? Bien.
¿Qué
¿Qué
tal?
tal? ¿Qué
How you doing?
tal?
Welcome. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Today we're going to be discussing Bhagavad Gita and really focusing on devotion and commitment.
Yeah. Uh, you can say that kind of a general essence of the Bhagavad Gita, like a general message, is that of devotion to the divine. And I think we're gonna take this and go there, but also I think maybe find ways to relate it to devotion to anything at all.
Yeah.
This can be translated to any aspect of your life, and then what you receive from whatever your devotion is determined by whatever your devotion is about and towards.
Absolutely. Yeah, when you think of devotion, you can also just think about consistency as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Being consistent in things in your life that, I mean, it's very similar. What do you want to devote yourself to? What do you want to be consistent about in your life? And what is going to create positive shifts in your life that you want to really be grounded in? So that's kind of what devotion and consistency and commitment feel like for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we can take this in both ways, and I think that's beautiful.
Yeah, and I totally agree. As far as like what the qualities of devotion are, they involve commitment and like dedication, and consistency, right? Especially with things like I think that we'll get into. Um, uh, the measure of your devotion is kind of more, or the degree of your devotion is kind of measured by your consistency and how often you show up in that way.
Right.
And what's cool about this too is what might arise from this is what are we devoted to that we are unconscious of? Are we devoted to, you know, um,
Negative thought patterns.
yeah, our jobs even more so than our spirit? That's one that
Wow.
deserves some clarity.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah, because so many people can relate to that.
Yeah.
I remember the first time I started really being consistent about anything, it changed my life.
Yeah.
I was in a really depressed state, and the only way that I could get out of it was to devote myself to creating small shifts in my life that were going to be consistent so that I could come out of this depression. And so there were just small things. Like, I think that's really important too, is to not be like, I'm gonna promise myself to be consistent with this giant plan. I'm going to do 2 hours of working out every day and an hour of chanting, and like that's great. But just in my personal experience, it has been so wonderful to go about it in a gentle way.
Yeah.
To do like just to start small with yourself and with these practices of devotion and commitment, whatever it is that you decide, so that you can really be consistent with it. And if you do more one day, then that's great.
Yeah.
But really being consistent with like small steps.
Yeah. It's wonderful.
Every day.
I love it, and I could testify too. And this is a good moment to kind of declare a couple of things. One, that what you are choosing to devote yourself to is really good for you, and the amount that you devote yourself to it is that also healthy. As an example, when I first got into yoga, I was super devoted to physical yoga, practicing for 2 hours every day, which is a lot. And it was great and it was beautiful, and I did that for a little over a year, I think. which is a long time to be doing that every day. I may have missed a day or two here and there, but I ended up getting injured. I ended up getting injured because of that devotion being out of balance with the rest of my life. It became that, you know, when I first started that way, it was aligned with my life. I had the time, I had the opportunity to do it where it wasn't stressful, and it felt really good. But even as my life adjusted and it became more difficult to maintain that, I still maintained it with a determination, which I thought was a good thing. And then I ended up injuring myself and realized that my devotion was off balance with what was healthy for me.
Wow. So this is
a big message.
This is a beautiful message in allowing yourself to adapt to your life and how your life changes. And again, coming back to that gentleness with yourself and being able to see that when, okay, my life has shifted and I'm not going to get rid of this practice altogether. This practice is a part of me now, and it's creating a life that I want to live, and creating the person that I want to be. So definitely don't get rid of it, but how can I shift and adapt this practice to best suit the life that I'm living right now, and be a healthier practice overall for me, so I can sustain it.
Right. So it maintains wellness for you. You have a You're welcome. It's a little fuzzy thing. And allowing, like, things don't have to be exactly the same for the rest of your life, you know. And really, what this comes into is really listening to your needs, also.
Yes.
You know, and there's a balance with this, just like anything else, because we don't want to come to a place where we start making excuses. That's something where we have to be really honest, because it'd be easy to make excuses to not do what is good for us, you know, and that's where discipline comes in. But on the other end of it, when the discipline gets out of whack on the, you know, on like the opposite end of that spectrum, then it can become too much, and you end up doing it out of repetition. You lose all the beauty of what the practice is, of whatever it is.
Yeah, so just like checking in with yourself honestly all the time.
All the time.
Really being honest with yourself about, is this serving me? Am I making excuses? Just, am I being honest?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you can get into it. This happens to me with my physical practices now, you know, especially coming from a place where I had injured myself with a beautiful practice, you know. Now I show up every day, you know, and I just meet myself exactly honestly where I'm at, and I start a practice and allow my body to do the talking, allow my body to do the expressions, instead of being in my head about it and being like, well, because I used to be like, I have to do Ashtanga every day, or I have to do Vinyasa every day.
I have to do 2 hours.
2 hours
every
of
day.
yoga.
Yeah, I had a very similar experience with yoga as well, and rooted in that experience of making sure I did like an hour and a half of yoga or whatever it was, of like intense hardcore yoga, was this underlying need to lose weight in the process. And so as I'm like releasing all these habits and shame surrounded by thousands of years of generational, you know, trauma for the women in my family, and I'm sure the men in my family as well. It's important to look at, like, why are we really doing these things? What am I really devoted to?
Right.
Is my devotion pure? And so when I started noticing that that's why I was doing like excessive amounts of yoga, I was like, okay, there's a time and place to do this kind of yoga. I'm not going to get rid of it. Like there's times where it feels really good, but then there's also times where I can feel myself forcing myself to do something where I'm actually just exhausted, and I should probably just, like, even just laying there now, like if I lay there for 20 minutes on my mat with like a clear mind and have a meditation, that's enough. That's more than enough. And like you said, just really honoring your body and where it's at in each day. It's so important.
Yeah.
And in a way, that's devotion and commitment to honoring yourself and your body.
Definitely.
So
beautiful. And it's good too to look at the goal of what you're devoted to. You know, what's the end goal or outlook of what you're doing and why you're doing it? You know, for example, if you're devoted to physical, just while we're on the subject, if you're devoted to physical yoga, what's the ultimate goal and why are you showing up every day? You know, you're showing up like I was showing up because when I got into it on the meditation side first, and then started the physical practice after that. And I realized that the physical practice offered a really beautiful platform for a state to getting into the state of meditation. So that was part of my motivation there. But then also, what I started to realize is, for the first time in my life, I had relief from lower back pain. I suffered from severe low back pain for a very long time, and when I started practicing yoga, I got very excited that I was getting relief. I got too excited, and then and that turned into like an inflamed version of like, ooh, I'm relieved from all this back pain. I'm like a gymnast now, and I'm doing all this crazy stuff. And it felt really good to do that, but it felt good to the ego to do that.
Yeah.
So that's what's important to acknowledge, and that's when it got caught up. So to look, and the goal changed. So the goal went from wanting to set my body up so it felt good, so that I wasn't distracted during meditation, and then it got into relieving physical pain and stuff like that I've come through, and even emotional pain too at the same time.
Yeah.
That became the goal, and then the goal ended up becoming, can I be the greatest yogi around?
Right.
And it got inflamed, and the ego took it.
Right, and so it shifted without even you noticing it, probably right away.
Well, yeah, and I didn't have that much of a lot of what we talk about, the practice of awareness and things like that. That practice wasn't really established in me yet.
Right.
So that's why I was able to get inflamed in that way. Yeah.
So this is beautiful. Maybe really creating an intention with your devotion and commitment, and restating that intention every time you go into your practice, every time you come into your devotion or commitment practice, ritual, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
You can restate that intention, and it can change every day, but there is usually an ultimate goal.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good.
That's good.
That's beautiful. And one of the things I learned when I studied Vedic rhythm was we started with a prayer every day before studying, you know, to kind of like bring ourselves to that place of humility and clarity of why we're doing what we're doing. And the prayer was to the drum, but the prayer was to awaken me to the truth about reality through the drum, through playing the drum. And that ended up becoming my prayer for everything that I was doing.
That's beautiful. That's actually something that we started implementing, is this morning chant.
Yeah.
So we do like our morning individual yoga session, workout, whatever we want to do separately but together. And just this week we started implementing.
Beautiful.
There's a little birdie.
There's a yellow bird.
Just this week we started implementing a chant, and that feels so good to begin our day in that way.
Yeah, it's really
in
good.
a really conscious way where we can clear ourselves and then begin our ritual.
Yeah.
And so we're offering it up in that way by doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's wonderful. I love it too because it came to us so naturally. It just kind of showed up
Yeah.
for us one day, and we have this like kind of relationship with it right now where it's we're joyfully devoted to doing it every day. It doesn't feel forced at all. Like we show up every day and it's just like, oh, the chant, yes, you know, and that's how you should feel about your practice. You should feel like so excited to get into your practice. If you get up in the morning and you're like, shit, I got to do yoga right now. You know, that's not the way you want to show up for yoga. You want to show up and be like running to your yoga mat, or running to your altar to pray, or running outside when it's freezing cold out because that's what wakes you up and makes you feel alive. Running to your partner and giving her a hug or him a kiss, you know, or whatever it is. And you should feel ecstatic about showing up for your practice.
I love that.
It should feel good, you know.
I love that. It should feel good. Often we force ourselves to do things that we think are going to be really good for us, and then they end up actually causing more harm than good because
Yeah.
we're trying to force something that just doesn't feel good. I remember when I finally got alone with myself, I created like a whole list. I was trying to figure out like how I'm going to set up my day, and I was trying to be like super masculine about it because that's kind of what I needed. So every 30 minutes there was like, okay, wake up and you're gonna do this, and then you're gonna do that, and then you'll do that, and then you'll do that, and then you have a little slot here to do whatever you want, and then like it was just so like so rigid, and there was no free flow within this committed schedule.
Yeah.
You know, and that didn't last for more than like 2 days because it did not feel good. And so it's really important to honor yourself and feel good and create space and time for your devotion and your rituals, but also create that space where it can kind of flow with your other responsibilities and what you need to do.
Yeah, really wonderfully put, about finding the balance of, again, making sure you don't make excuses to not show up when it is good for you, but at the same time showing up in a way that allows it to bend, to make sure that it's present, you know, and that's what will keep you joyfully practicing or joyfully endeavoring towards whatever it is. You know, it'll keep you in a really pleasant place if it has a little bit of room to bend with your life and what you feel inside, with your body, with your mind in the way that it is. And that may be a very strict, rigid schedule.
Right, that may feel really good.
That
and
may work
well
for you. Yeah, and for a time. But again, making sure that you allow it to shift and that you're not doing it just with the mind, that it's your whole being that's involved with it. And it should feel really, really good, you know? And when it starts to feel like an occupation, then maybe it's time to bend it a little bit and see where it flows from there.
And I hear a voice in my head of someone saying, well, I don't have time. I have no time. I'm so busy. I don't have time to devote myself to anything else. I'm just running around all the time. What do we say to that voice?
I know, I love that voice. Well, I'll mention a quote and then I'll elaborate on the quote.
Okay.
Does that sound all right?
Yeah.
The quote's from Pattabhi Jois, who developed the Ashtanga system and organized the Ashtanga system of yoga, was a very famous yogi. Also was kind of like a yogi fail. He did some not so good things with his practice and manipulated people and just really whatever. I don't want to sit here and spread rumors about Pattabhi Jois, but he did say this one quote that always stuck with me. He said, if you should practice for an hour every day. And then he said, if you don't have an hour to practice every day, you should practice for 2 hours every day. Now, to elaborate on that, what he was saying was, you do have time for what you're committed to.
Absolutely.
Whatever you choose to be devoted to, you will find time to do it. No matter how much time is necessary for it, you'll fit it in. If you are truly committed and truly devoted to whatever it is, then time is no limitation to it. You will find a way to do it. And I really stand by that. Of you will make sacrifices in the other areas of your life that are less meaningful to do things that are more important. And this is where your priorities come into play.
Yeah, and what we were saying before about what are you devoted to unconsciously.
Perfect.
So yeah, so it goes all like just full loop back to that. So if you don't have the time, then what are you doing with that time?
Right. What's in place of that?
Yeah, and that'll give you some guidance on maybe, okay, so that's what I'm really devoted to right now.
Yeah.
Is this going to lead me to where I want to be? And
Right.
is this in alignment with the highest expression of myself?
Right. And what's the goal of that devotion? If you find out, you know, well, for example, our friend Alicia talked about this. She wasn't talking about this, but she mentioned it and it relates, so I'm going to mention what she said. She said at times she would work all day and then she would come home and part of her resting practice, I guess you could say, was watching TV or something. And she decided to shift her devotion to that, which was justifiable, to continuing working so that she can start her own independent business.
Hey, we talked about this last
time.
Yeah.
But it fits here really,
It
really
does.
well because she made a sacrifice in one area of her life to do something, because she looked at the end goal of it. She was like, okay, the end goal of this TV watching moment was, oh yeah, I got to relax my mind and my body, and it was a healthy thing for her. But at the same time, the end result of that was she felt a little bit more relaxed. The end result of the other thing that she did, she determined inside of herself, was a greater result, and that she deserved more focus. So this is really, really a great thing for all of us to do in our own lives, of saying, you know, what's taking place of my ability to show up for, you know, let's say it's a spiritual practice, let's say it's yoga or something like that, or even just a self-care time, you know, whatever it is. Finding out what's in place of that, and then weighing out, you know, make a little scale inside, and which one's for your greatest good.
Yeah.
It's worth it.
Yeah, it's so worth it. So worth it. So really getting clear on where it is, what's binding you, in a way, so that you can kind of clear that out of the way and make space for what it is that you truly want to embrace into your life. And so this is where we can begin speaking on some devotion and commitment from the text.
Sure. Let's do it. I just want to make a little note so both of our minds are on it. That's something I think I'd like to touch on, if it comes through, is what we're committed to inside our minds. It'll probably come through with that, but just so you have that with you, I think that's something that would be good to bring up in this, if it doesn't come out and we remember. Okay, so all through the Gita there's talk of devotion, there's talk of commitment, and at this point, chapter 9 of the Gita, he starts to talk about you know, because a lot of the inquiry in the book is of what is the greatest, I guess, human. What does it look like? What are the qualities of someone who's truly divine, someone who's truly enlightened, someone who's ready for heaven? You know, someone who's really truly aligned with pure consciousness and the most divine presence. You know, what is that like? What are the qualities of that? And one of the things that comes up that is often repeated is an unwavering a mind that doesn't move from being focused on the divine. So a mind that is consistently focused on the divine in every endeavor. Whether it's freezing cold outside, thinking about the divine. Whether it's scorching hot outside, thinking about the divine. Whether it's a calm, neutral temperature that's very comfortable, thinking about the divine. Whether somebody's screaming at you in the face, hating you, thinking about the divine and the connection between everything. Or whether someone's praising your name and loving you, thinking about the divine.
That's beautiful. And it doesn't even have to be like you're thinking about the divine, thought, you know?
Yes.
It can be this radiating kind of essence within you too. It could be clear, it could be no thought, but it's this connection within. It's this state of being. And it could also be thought. That might be how we practice coming back to the divine, is through thought at first. But I find for me that when I really feel connected, there's no thought.
I agree, and I think that's ultimately where pure devotion exists, is in that space where there isn't thought. And like you said, you know, maybe prayer or maybe mantra or positive affirmation is what leads you to that space. But ultimately, that is the space we want to be in. It's just an essence of, you can't describe it, you know?
Yeah, there's really no words to describe this essence and this silence within yourself. But it is like an all-consuming love.
Yeah. and it's undeniable.
Yeah. And I think the purpose of speaking on this, why we're bringing this up right now, I guess would be when you connect to the divine, you yourself are cleansed and purified, and you're able to more fully show up in the world as your true self, and you're able to serve others in that way as well, and you kind of radiate and sprinkle that love, devotion, and truth everywhere that you go with you, and in return you're kind of making the world a better place just by being.
Yeah.
So this is why we're speaking on this, and I think this is why this is so important, is because it'll lead you and your family and the world into a much greater state of being.
Definitely. I mean, that was so we influence our world directly just by being ourselves. Every moment that we express or don't express, we're influencing the world around us, and all the people and beings, that we find ourselves in contact with, and whatever our presence is what that effect is. So, and then whoever has shared those moments with us, then they carry that piece of us around, whatever it may have been, and then that gets shared through them. You know what I mean? So, and it really, that flows through the entire world.
Yeah, energy is so contagious.
Yeah, it's yeah, absolutely. It's a completely shared experience of presence all the time. And I agree that the importance of this has a value beyond anything else in this world. In my opinion, that this is like the thing that we can do all the time. We can be with this all the time, no matter what we're doing, no matter what we're saying. We can have this state, this presence within us that's being shared through everything that we share. If we're talking about motorcycles, you know what I mean? We can share the same presence during that time.
Yeah.
And it goes undetected almost. This is what the Tao keeps coming up for me today. But that's what the Tao is. When someone's connected with the Tao, you don't even realize you're being blessed.
Yeah. And even when someone's kind of pushing hate onto you, let's say, you can still remain in this state where their hate can't even get in, and you just radiate love back to them. Yeah. And in return you may be able to lessen their
shift them. That's real. I've witnessed it.
Yeah, I've witnessed it too.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
It's such a beautiful thing. And all you're doing is being. Yeah. There's nothing that you have to do.
Yeah, it's actually less effort than getting involved and trading hate with them.
Right.
It's much less effort.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I just wanted to state that, and also that it doesn't matter what God you're devoted to, and this isn't about religion in any way. What we're speaking on, this is truly about what we just spoke about.
Yeah.
Love.
It really is just about love and trusting that.
Yeah. See what you did there.
You see what happened?
That was a good one. And this is just a beautiful tool to help to kind of get there or show us the way.
Yeah. Maybe I'll pull some quotes.
Yeah.
And see what comes through with them. He says here we're in chapter 9. This is verse 29, I think. He says, I am the same to all beings. This is God talking, or the divine talking. I am the same to all beings. I favor none and reject none. But those who worship me within me, those who worship me live within me, and I live in them. Now, it's if you look at this and say, well, what does worship mean? What we're talking about is that worship is showing up to this space is what this is referring to as the worship, is constantly being in the presence of the divinity that you have inside, and connecting with that, because it's not outside in the world. And it talks about it here. Those who are that devoted live within me, and I live within them. So he's saying it's really just a noticing. So when you enter this space, you realize you're with the divine constantly, and that's what this devotion offers. And it's not like you get something. It's not like the divine shows up for you. You just realize that it's there and get to experience what's been around the whole time.
And the beautiful thing about worship is that there's no need to actually like create a whole ritual of worship. You can create worship in every act of your day.
Yeah.
As you're washing the dishes, that is an act of worship. As you're walking down the street, that can be an act of worship. So just living and being in this presence that we're speaking about can be an act of worship if you're offering it up or in.
I just remembered a part that just really goes great with this. Let's see. Partaking of the essence of worship, forever they are freed of themselves, but non-worshippers cannot be happy in this world or any other. And he talks about earlier about different ways of worship. That's what this chapter 4 now.
Wow. Okay, let's
so from here
go into that a little bit deeper, and then
this
we'll
part
go there. Yeah,
sure.
I like that a lot.
Partaking of the essence of worship, forever they are freed of themselves, the little self. But non-worshippers cannot be happy in this world or any other.
Wow.
This is really powerful.
Very powerful.
This
so
is really powerful.
Non-worshippers cannot be happy. Let's touch on that
Yeah.
a little bit deeper, because that can feel harsh. It's like, okay, so now I'm just shunned from being happy because I decide not to worship God,
Right.
but that's not what this is speaking about.
That's really why I was so excited to talk about this, is because we can really clarify what worship is.
Right.
We can really look at it and say, and worship is your devotion. Your devotion is that worship. Is when you show up. When you show up wholeheartedly, that's worship. And that's towards whatever you choose. So you if you think about it in this way, every day you are committed to showing up to your job, you're worshiping your job and everybody that's involved with it, right? You're showing up. That's a mode of worship.
Yeah.
For you in a way.
Even like waking up and what's your first thought? That's what you're most kind of devoted to.
Yeah.
So really noticing, what are your thoughts constantly filled with? What's your mind filled with? What are you devoted to? And then when we go back to worship and that statement of worship, and non-worshipers cannot be happy, that makes me think of kind of like, if you're not clear and if you're not in this state of worshiping, you're constantly like kind of trying to do something more. You're never happy in the moment that you're in, just being where you're at.
Yeah.
And so that kind of that gives me a little bit of a perspective of what worship and non-worship is like. Non-worship, I'm constantly trying to escape where I'm at right now to gain something better, or to, usually it's gain something more than what I have right in this moment.
Yeah.
And so a state of worship is to truly love and be present with all that is right now.
Amazing. Absolutely. And the non-worshipping is kind of like the realm of just the mental activity. Right? And then the worship is the true presence. And like you said, it really can only truly exist, any form of worship, in the moment, right now. That's the only place it really exists in its purest sense.
Yeah, and so that's what this is really speaking about.
Yeah.
It's not like you must worship me, the
Yeah.
Almighty God. And I'm just gonna like keep going back there a little bit because this
Good.
used to be so triggering for me, and that's why I pushed away religious beliefs and all of that stuff for so long. Because I grew up in this way, and so I was just so like repulsed by it.
Yeah.
But now having this new perspective, and so I just want to make that really clear for whoever else may have went through a similar experience growing up, that this is something that you can open up to. This is something that is not limited to like a certain belief system and a certain God. This is for everybody who wants to live a joyful, present, conscious life.
Yeah, it's completely available for everybody, whether you believe in God or not.
Right.
You don't even have to believe in any kind of God at all.
Right.
And this is still available. That's what's so beautiful about this is you can find that presence inside yourself, and that's enough. You don't have to go any further than that. And in fact, that may be a more pure version of it than anything else, because that's the real experiential version of it, you know, in a way. And that's, I think, just incredibly beautiful. And your natural, pure actions are your purest form of worship too.
Yeah.
So like for you, like when you get up and really honor yourself and dance, you know what I mean? That's you worshiping the divine. You know, that's you being present with your body that the divine gave you, that sprouted from that source of creation. And that's you embodying that creative aspect of yourself and allowing all the energies to move through you, you know?
Right, and before I really connected to a divine source again, I just started connecting to my heart space and my womb space within me. And that's what like started me on this journey back to myself, was just reconnecting and giving gratitude for all that I was right now. And so it didn't have to have anything to do with anything, but it did, you know?
Yeah. It leads you home, and whatever happens when you get there is whatever is going to happen, you know what I mean? I remember, you know, I was raised born again Christian, and I really, really loved it. I found such a shelter in Jesus, you know, when I was young. And then, you know, when I became like a teenager, not to tell a huge story or anything, but when I became like a teenager, you know, Jesus wasn't cool. So like I turned my back on it and like just led another path from there. And then as I entered into my 20s and my teenage years ended, I just kind of bumped into Buddhism, you know, because there happened to be some I was into like hardcore music and stuff like that. There happened to be some people who were into hardcore music who were also Buddhists, and I read a book called Hardcore Zen, and it was by this Zen monk who was in a punk band, you know what I mean? And it was just really cool, and he had a cool perspective on it. And what was interesting is that returned me to this presence that we're talking about. It returned me to that God space inside. It didn't have the name Jesus on it anymore, but it was the same space, you know? So it was like this Buddhist practice that reintroduced me to that divinity. That, you know, again, and it all evolved, and then it got really into Krishna and everything like that. And all the different names are wonderful, and they're great focuses, but the essence within them is one.
Right.
Within all of them is singular. And that's what the most beautiful discovery that I've found is, and that essence is in my heart, and in the heart of all beings.
Yeah. So beautiful. Thank you. Yes.
Yeah. Anything else you'd like to share? I can go through, read a little bit of this.
Yeah, I think I'm ready to go on to the different types of worship.
Yeah, and this is this is Bhagavad Gita chapter 4 now. And this starts at verse 25 and goes to verse 31. So it says, some of yoga pray to the gods and make this their worship. Some offer worship by worship itself in the fire of God. This is interesting. So that's kind of what we were talking about, of like just the act of worship in itself is the worship, is enough. Then he says, others offer their senses in the fire of self-abnegation. Others offer their senses and the objects into the fire of the senses. In other words, making, you know, kind of saying, giving back. We talked about this earlier too,
Yeah.
of when you enjoy something, giving that enjoyment to the divine instead of keeping it for yourself.
Or when someone praises you,
Yes, that's where it came from. Yeah.
giving that praise up.
Yeah, all the good feelings, all the, like, when you smell, when you hear a beautiful song from a songbird, you know, across the way that's blessing you with her voice, offering that to divine, even though there's an enjoyment that you experience, and offering the enjoyment to the divine. Others offer all actions of the senses and of the breath in the fire. The fire being the true being, I believe that's what they're talking about here. Kindled by wisdom of the yoga of self-restraint. Right, so this is kind of controlling of the senses. Some offer wealth, some offer austerities, their practice of yoga, others ascetics, offer their studies of the scriptures and wisdom itself. They offer that to the divine. So you kind of see the theme of it. It's not taking the credit for it.
Yeah, I am this and I am that and I am the best
I'm the
yogi
doer.
and I am this and yeah.
Yeah.
It's offering it all to the divine.
Yeah, because we don't need it. And what it means if we don't do that is that we give it to the ego, and it creates kind of an egoic presence with it.
Right, and then it comes back to what we were speaking about before, and we can call it like a mask.
Yeah.
But the reason why we started this devotion and commitment becomes skewed, and the true goal of it becomes delusional.
Yeah, it becomes towards, like what you mentioned earlier about self-gain.
Yeah.
You know, you're looking just to get something out of it. You know, you're looking like squeeze the juice out of it, you know.
Right.
Where this other way is kind of like...
Right, which I love juice, but offer that juice.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a great acknowledgement that when we eat food, this is a good way to do it. Let's say it's a juicy lime. I love limes. You know, like the sun hits the lime tree, right? And then the lime tree came from the soil, right? And then the rain provided what the lime tree needed to grow the fruit. And there's this whole cycle of existence for that little fruit to be there for you to enjoy. And when we acknowledge all of that, we're acknowledging this divine cycle.
That's beautiful.
Of existence and life, and saying, I get to enjoy this because of this whole process.
So beautiful. Whereas if the soil was like, I'm just going to keep this all to myself and
There'd be
call
no
it
lime.
mine, there'd be no lime.
Yeah, that's a beautiful way to look at it, as where if any one of those moments had an ego presence, it's impossible because it's nature, and just said, this is my rain, this is my water, and didn't give it. You know,
Right.
if the sky said that, then there would never be any sustenance for life. If the sun shaded itself and said, this is my light is perfect and beautiful, and I worked for this light. You know, I worked to be this sun, you know, so I'm not going to give it. But all these presences of nature freely give themselves
Work together.
and offer themselves to each other. What a beautiful metaphor.
That is so beautiful.
Wow.
And work together. So, I mean, part of that is allowing us to be here right now, speaking on what we're speaking about.
Yeah.
Like, that's really,
Sure.
really beautiful. And so this is like an act of devotion in every moment. This comes back to like when we're eating our food, taking a moment to really give gratitude to that. When you're squeezing that lime in your water, like that is an act of
Worship.
devotion and worship.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
that's just so beautiful. And even just this moment, can we take a moment?
Yeah.
It feels really good to just
Yeah.
bring that inward. And it doesn't have to be anything more than this. Just a moment of gratitude.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Grateful for you. Thank you to this moment and this building that we're sitting on.
Thank you to the sun.
Sun shining.
Thank you to these beautiful birds that joined us.
Yeah, there's a few of them hanging out.
Yeah, they're having so much fun with us.
They're great.
Yeah.
To the Gita.
Yes, thank you for this beautiful teaching.
Yeah, its presence.
These beautiful scriptures.
Yeah, the translators that kept it alive through time. I mean, this is old. Thousands of years old, and the fact that I have it here in my hands, I feel so blessed, and can't do anything but offer it. And even this right now, this conversation is one of the ways that I found to give back, is these dialogues.
Yeah.
You know, it's been my form of worship. So thank you for joining me in this.
Thank you.
So beautiful.
Well, I think this is a good space to,
Wrap?
yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, because we wanted to keep it under an hour so we could fit it.
Perfect.
And it feels like it's been not an hour at all, but we have only 15 minutes.
I think this is a good place. I think we really went there. Maybe we can just do a quick little close,
Yeah.
and a little tie up and collect everything. So what we touched was devotion, which has all this stuff that's connected with it, which are consistency and dedication and commitment, and presence. You know, all these things come together to allow devotion to be there, and for the devotion, checking in with what we're devoted to, maybe unmindfully, and seeing how that may get in the way of things that we want to mindfully devote ourselves to. You know, if we find our minds trying to limit ourselves and saying we don't have time, or you know, or whatever it might be, and checking in there in those spaces, and choosing, you know, looking at the end results or the goals of what we're devoted to in every aspect, and how that offers themselves to our lives.
Right, so noticing how these different things that we're devoted to right now are affecting our lives, and now that they're in our conscious awareness, getting to choose whether we want to continue devoting ourselves to this, or if there's shifts that we need to make in our lives so that we can open up to happiness and love.
Yeah, and being devoted to a spiritual presence and practice. We touched on it a little bit, but the beautiful thing about that is it involves everything in your life. You can do this and nobody even knows you're doing it.
Yeah.
You can be there, and it's just a presence that you're with all the time, just constantly acknowledging and having a kind of a presence of gratitude for everything that's all around, you know, and being committed to that, and being committed to yourself and what's going on inside of you.
Yeah, as like a silent practice that I'll do is just noticing the small, beautiful things around me that bring life and color and just magnificence that if I wasn't being present, I otherwise would probably miss. And so taking a moment to just witness what you're surrounded by and really slowing down has been a beautiful tool of mine and an act of worship of mine. And it brings like tears to my eyes every time, because we're just surrounded by so much beauty and so much divinity. And when we take a moment to witness that, you really feel that within yourself as well, and you make space to connect with yourself and what's outside of you. And so that's like a beautiful silent little practice that you can do it in any moment. If you feel your mind being cluttered or just racing, you can come back and notice that flower and take a moment to touch your heart and breathe in that moment with that flower or something.
Yeah, beautiful, and whatever's divine for you, you know, whatever, you know, the qualities of divinity are loving and peaceful. Whatever offers that, devote yourself to that. You know, and it doesn't have to look like anything specific. It can look like specific things, but this is yours.
Yes.
This is all yours, and it has to be close to you. It has to be real. It has to be closer than close. It's nearer than the nearest thing to you is the divine. I love the Sufi phrase where they say the divine is closer to you than your own jugular vein. which is an interesting imagery, but I think it provides something really lovely as far as how close this divinity is, and it's always present. It's ever present, all the time.
And I love that, just really making it your own, not trying to mold yourself into something that you're not, or trying to mold this practice of worship into something that doesn't feel good, but really tuning into what feels good for you. And that may take some trial and error, trying different things and seeing what fits for you, what feels good, what brings you closer to the divine. And there's no right or wrong way to go about it.
Yeah. So yeah,
Beautiful.
feels good for me.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Again, if you have any questions, comments, please let us know. We're here for you.
Yeah, we're
in
here.
every and all ways. So much love and gratitude.
So much love. Thank you for joining us on this, during this beautiful, beautiful moment of time. Thank you for showing
Thank
up.
you.
So grateful for you.